In just 1 year, the United States could legally stop being a democracy. No bombs, no foreign invasions, just a carefully engineered demolition from within.
They're a national emergency that threatens our security and our very way of life. It's a very great threat to our country.
People are asking me to run, and there's a whole story about running for a third term. I don't know. I never looked into it. They do say there's a way you can do it, but I don't know about that.
And the worst part? Most people won't even see it happening until it's too late. The United States has always prided itself on being a democracy, a nation built on the belief that no one person should have absolute power. The Constitution was designed with checks and balances to make sure of it, but let's be real, history has tested that balance over and over again. And guess what? We are now facing the biggest test our country has ever seen. With partisan division at an all-time high and Congress paralyzed by gridlock, some people have convinced themselves that a single unchecked leader is more efficient than a messy democratic process. But history's not on their side. Every time a leader consolidates power, the outcome is the same. Democracy crumbles and the people lose. We're about to crack open the reality of how power in America is shifting. Is it for the better, or are we watching democracy burn?
For a third term, he told NBC News over the phone over the weekend that he's not joking about it, but legal scholars doubt it is actually possible.
Musk offering money to voters there who signed a petition against what he calls activist judges, handing out a pair of $1 million checks last night. Democrats accuse him of trying to buy the seat.
The American economy is in trouble. The American empire is in decline. You have to face those problems. That's not being done. What's being done is to say we have difficulties, but they're all somebody else's fault, and we're going to solve it by punishing them.
It's time for a little grade school refresher on how the US government is supposed to work. Checks and balances have been the sacred guardrails of the US government. The founding fathers built a system designed to keep tyranny in check. They carefully crafted the Constitution, splitting power between three branches: legislative to write the laws, executive to enforce them, and judicial to interpret them. Simple, right? A delicate balancing act meant to keep any one branch from gaining too much power. While the Constitution was written to keep power in check, power has a funny way of slipping through the cracks. Presidents time and time again have tested the limits, sometimes out of necessity, sometimes out of sheer ambition. So what happens when those checks become meaningless? Well, let's see if a little stroll back through the past can give us some answers. Let's start with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the undisputed godfather of executive power. He issued over 3,700 executive orders, packed the Supreme Court, and issued the infamous Executive Order 9066, which led to the forced internment of Japanese Americans in what were essentially government-approved concentration camps. Then came Nixon, who decided the best way to secure his power was to spy on his enemies, because nothing says "trust me" like turning the presidency into a paranoid surveillance state.
Or when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal.
They made a movie about it. You should watch it. Reagan took the surveillance state and said, let's make it bigger.
As you know, one of the most critical duties that we faced upon taking office was controlling the influx of illegal drugs into this country. The South Florida Task Force, which we established under the leadership of Vice President George Bush, has, in the opinion of virtually all knowledgeable observers, been highly successful in slowing the illegal flow of drugs into the United States.
Miami police, in dealing with that city's enormous drug trade, have developed a reputation for toughness. They've been known to break down a door or two.
During the infamous War on Drugs, he handed the intelligence agency free rein, shredding safeguards in the name of law and order. It makes you wonder if it was just a cover for targeting certain communities. And then there's Bush Jr., who basically told civil liberties to take a hike with the Patriot Act, an executive order that turned warrantless surveillance and indefinite detention into the new normal. Oh, and what about his unauthorized war in Iraq? Where was Congress to slow down the invasion? Obama came in with promises of change, but doubled down on executive overreach, laying the groundwork for future presidents to bend, bypass, and outright ignore the limitations of presidential power. He was writing executive orders like a spoiled toddler because Barack wants drone strikes. Then there's Trump. Oh boy. He took Obama's executive overreach playbook and cranked it up to 11. And thanks to the Supreme Court's 2024 ruling in Trump v. United States, he's on the verge of getting near total immunity for his so-called official acts. Translation? He could arrest political enemies, obstruct investigations, even deploy the military against civilians, all with a legally backed Supreme Court justification. So riddle me this, why the hell is there such a desperate push to strengthen the executive branch? Supporters of Trump's executive power grab aren't just cheering him on. Conservatives and MAGA supporters see it as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reshape the country exactly how they want it. The swamp hasn't been drained, it's just gotten murkier. Agencies like the IRS, Department of Defense, Social Security Administration, and Department of Education are still bleeding taxpayer money like a busted ATM, with zero accountability and a trail of fraud that no one bothers to follow. God save us. I mean, Elon save us. And Congress? Forget it. In theory, they're supposed to act as a check on executive power, but in reality, they move at the speed of a DMV line on a Monday morning. Thanks to lobbyists, endless committee reviews, partisan slap fights, and general incompetence, the legislative branch has become a glorified waiting room where nothing actually gets done. So, naturally, the only solution is for Trump and his unelected sidekick Elon to step in and gut the system. Government agencies are too bloated, too corrupt, too expensive. Trump's plan is to take control, slash the programs, and cut spending down to the bone. To save the economy from hyperinflation and financial ruin, Trump needs more power, more centralized authority, and fewer obstacles in his way. Because giving one man unchecked control over the government has never gone wrong before. How did Trump manage to grab this much power? And more importantly, what happens when draining the swamp turns into dismantling democracy itself?
When Donald Trump won November's election, financial markets seemed almost as pleased as his supporters. Anticipating a Wall Street-friendly administration, a Trump bump sent the S&P 500 up 2.5% after polling day, a rally that continued right through to mid-February in a peak of 6.3% higher. But since then, uncertainty about his economic plans, specifically the cost of those tariffs, have caused a Trump slump, with all the gains since Election Day handed back.
During Trump's first term, he walked into Washington thinking he was on the set of another episode of The Apprentice, only to realize bureaucracy, oversight, and global crises don't care about his brand of chaos. But now, he's done playing nice. With a full term already under his belt, he's ready to dismantle every barrier standing in his way. He claims he has no idea what Project 2025 is, the Heritage Foundation's blueprint to centralize executive power, gut federal agencies, and push a hard-right agenda. But his VP, J.D. Vance, sure does, and the policies coming out of Trump's White House, they look like Project 2025's to-do list. He's even outpacing the plan, throwing in some extra madness for good measure, like floating ideas to take over Panama, Canada, Greenland, and the Gaza Strip. Before the champagne at his inauguration even went flat, Trump went on an executive order rampage. In just 30 days, he signed over 70 orders, tearing apart federal protections, reversing past policies, and pulling more power into the executive branch. And let's talk about money, because Trump knows how to work the system. By controlling the GOP's cash flow, he's got Republican lawmakers on a short leash. Step out of line, and their re-election funds will mysteriously dry up. And speaking of Congress, Republicans own both chambers, meaning the Trump political machine can terminate any bill that might limit his power. Then there's his cabinet of chaos. Trump's inner circle is filled with hardline disruptors, including key architects of Project 2025. These disruptors' entire mission is to reshape the government into an efficient presidential dictatorship. And don't forget the Supreme Court, Trump's biggest legacy move. His judicial appointments secured a conservative majority, which conveniently ruled in Trump v. United States that presidents have absolute immunity for their official acts, leaving the definition of official acts intentionally vague. For Trump, the stars have aligned, making him the center of gravity of power to do whatever he wants, as the checks and balances dissolve in his orbit. But you might be thinking, wait, if he oversteps with executive orders that go against the fabric of the American Constitution, he'll certainly be challenged in court, right? Which brings us to the DOJ and the courts. If Trump ignores a court ruling, what happens? If you think there's going to be law enforcement kicking down the door at the Oval Office and dragging Trump off to jail, no chance. The only way courts can enforce decisions is through the U.S. Marshals, and guess who controls them? Trump's Department of Justice. So what happens when a president orders the DOJ to ignore the courts? There is no mechanism to stop him.
Tonight, President Trump with a rare visit to the Department of Justice, going against long-held White House practice to keep distance from the DOJ to preserve its independence. But for Mr. Trump, wielding his influence is his mission.
Meanwhile, he's realigning the military, purging top officials, killing diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, and installing loyalists who serve him, not the Constitution. He claims it's about combat effectiveness, but is it that, or is it about control? And then there's the media crackdown. Journalists are facing legal and financial retaliation for reporting the truth. The Associated Press banned from covering official events because they refused to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. Yes, really. The message is clear: either bend to the will of this administration or get shut out completely. So here's the big earth-shattering question about the short-term consequences of these actions. How will this change the price of eggs? Okay, that's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but there could be consequences more costly than the price of eggs skyrocketing. Once you tear down the checks and balances, the momentum for the consolidation of power is like a freight train. First, he'll stack law enforcement with his personal bootlickers, turning federal agencies into his own secret police. Investigations will suddenly start conveniently targeting his enemies, and arrests, well, those might just become a little more selective. Expect protests, lawsuits, and whatever shred of trust people still have in law enforcement to go straight down the drain. Then there's his birthright citizenship ban, which is basically a constitutional time bomb waiting to explode. The 14th Amendment says every person born on US soil is a US citizen, regardless of whether their parents were US citizens at the time of their birth or not. But Trump wants to challenge that and believes only children of US citizens should be given US citizenship. Why? Well, he says it's to prevent pregnant immigrants from crossing the border just to give birth, making their child a US citizen. Regardless of where you stand on that topic, the 14th Amendment is clear. Could it be changed? Yes, but that would take 3/4 of our US states to agree and ratify a change, which we know would never happen. So to bypass the checks and balances, the courts will be tied up in legal warfare, lower rulings will contradict each other, and the Supreme Court, the Trump Supreme Court, will have the final say on whether the 14th Amendment will mean anything at all. Meanwhile, he's deploying the military at the border without Congress, because who needs legislative approval when you've got raw, executive Supreme Court approved power? Lawsuits will flood in. States may resist, but once the military starts enforcing domestic policy, we'll have to ask where they might be deployed next. And if you thought town halls were chaotic before, just wait. With social programs gutted and funding frozen for healthcare, infrastructure, and federal assistance, representatives will have to face a furious public demanding answers they don't have, or they'll have the horrible job of convincing the public not to believe their own eyes and ears. Financial markets? Brace for impact! Trump's expanded emergency powers will throw energy production and trade into chaos. Businesses will be left scrambling, and consumers? Get ready to pay more for everything. Through it all, the media won't be able to keep up. The scandals, the executive orders, the constitutional meltdowns, it'll be too much, too fast. The country will be split in two, and depending on where you stand, Trump will either be the strong leader America needed, or the one who finally burned democracy to the ground. Power is a tempting thing. Once someone has too much of it, they rarely let it go without a fight. And right now, the American presidency is shifting from an elected office to something far more dangerous. Because once executive power goes unchecked, short-term problems turn into long-term nightmares. The justification? Efficiency. The idea that government is too slow, too bloated, too dysfunctional, and that a single centralized decision maker can cut through the red tape and fix it all, it's an easy sell, especially when frustration with bureaucracy is at an all-time high. But history tells us exactly where this road tends to lead. And once a president extends power beyond legal limits, what stops the next one from doing the same? If Trump overrides term limits or manipulates the system to stay in power, he won't just be securing his own rule, he'll be setting a precedent. Future presidents, regardless of party, will inherit that unchecked authority and use it to their own ends. The system of checks and balances, the foundation of American democracy, will be gone.
President Joe Biden told a crowded Broadway theater in New York City last night that he was running for re-election because Donald Trump was determined to destroy the nation.
Where the DOJ becomes the executive branch's personal attack dog, impartial justice is replaced with targeting political enemies, crushing dissent, and rigging the legal system to keep a president and his allies untouchable. The US has long branded itself as a beacon of democracy, a model for free and fair elections, but if that image collapses, America's global influence collapses with it. Russia, China, and every authoritarian regime on the planet will celebrate. They won't have to undermine democracy abroad because America will have done it to itself. This is how democracies die, not in a single moment, not with a dramatic coup, but through slow, calculated shifts in power that go unchecked until it's too late. The question now isn't whether Trump or the next president will push the boundaries, it's whether anyone is left to push back. So ask yourself, is this the America you want? Because here's the truth, saving democracy isn't just Congress's job. Lawmakers can only do so much if the public isn't paying attention. The moment people stop questioning, stop engaging, stop fighting back, that's the moment democracy stops working. So, this isn't just about one president, one administration, or one political party, it's about the future of the country itself. Are we going to stand by while power is concentrated in the hands of the few, setting a dangerous precedent for future leaders? The answer isn't in the hands of politicians, it's in ours. Stay informed, speak up, demand transparency, because once democracy is gone, there is usually no getting it back. And if you enjoyed this video, you're gonna love one of these. Check them out!